All right, so it's been about 2 weeks since I've changed, or sorry, it's been about 2 weeks since I've last made a video, and I made a video on like potentially having the highest amount of cleave possible into like you know like melee cleaves, a bunch of other stuff like that, which obviously like is no longer the case anymore. 2 weeks ago when I made that, people were still queuing turbo, like we were running into melee cleaves, ret warrior, TSG, things like that. Now, obviously, the meta has changed in the past 2 weeks, and we're seeing a lot of casters. We're seeing a lot of shadow priests, a lot of demonology warlock. We're seeing a lot of Ellie shaman, um, and much less of those other like melee cleaves, I guess. Right. Um, in response to that, I've changed a lot of my, not really much of my build. I think I've changed a little bit about it, but for the most part, I have since like maybe 2.5 weeks ago, I started changing my build around in terms of my stat setup. So if anybody here remembers in my last video, I remember saying if it's anything like Shadowlands, Arms Warrior wants to stack at minimum, at least 15% crit. Sadly, that is no longer the case now. You obviously want to opt for more, being closer to 20%. Some people are even going higher than that, stacking 25, 26%. I'm one of those people that are stacking closer to 26%. I have a lot less haste right now, which again is due to in part with the fact that we're still gated on our weekly cap, right? So I can't. So like I already messed up, and it's mostly because I was playing Fury the first week before I started rerolling arms because I kept buffing arms more and more and more now to the point where now arms is better than Fury, which is fine. Like I was specced out more for Fury, but that's gonna change. I'm changing pieces every week, and I'm doing what I can. So I have a lot of mastery that I don't want as an arms warrior. Almost no arms warrior is stacking mastery. You get about 11% baseline. I think maybe one or two pieces of gear is okay to have mastery on it. The rest you want to go for haste. The rest you want to go for crit and have a good balance of versatility, obviously too. Um, I want to talk about why the potential reason why we run
Oh
crit.
yeah.
And it has to do a lot with a lot of your passives and a lot of your passive modifiers that buff critical damage, right? So you have cruel strikes, which again gives you free crit, increases the critical strike damage execute, right? Increases that by 10%. If you come over here, you have critical thinking, which also increases your critical strike chance, increased by 2%. Execute immediately refunds 10% of the target or 10% of the rage spent, right? And then sharpened blades. This is nerfed in PvP, so this will be 5 and 5. So your mortal strike, cleave, and execute critical strike damage is increased by 5%, and your execute has a 5% increased critical strike chance, right? So the you have a ton of modifiers that determine why it's better to run crit. Also, I forgot to mention that our two set, right? I got my two set last week. Mortal strike and cleave damage and chance to critically strike is increased by 10%. The fourth set is Mortal Strike, Cleave, and Execute critical strikes. Increase your damage and critical strike chance by 5% for 6 seconds. So you can see why this is going to continuously feed off of itself, giving you more crit, giving you more damage. And it's not terrible to stack crit as an arms warrior anyway. Like I said, I've got some mastery issues here. I'm going to be fixing that with the next couple weeks with more conquest and as more gear comes out. But I'm opting for a lot of crit. And on my alt warrior, which I've been gearing up a lot since the holiday season, I have no mastery. I have zero mastery, all crit and haste. Which my alt warrior is spec'd better in terms of stats. I've got closer to like 12% haste and like 26 or 27% crit, and the rest is versatility. I have not been playing a whole lot. The first time we queued, which is me uploading that VOD, I think of our arena queues, that was the day that we queued. We had not queued since then. And the meta has changed quite a bit. We tried to play Turbo, which is what we played on the first night, and it doesn't feel so good. So in the meantime, our friend Chan, who was the Mistweaver, that night that we played with, had re-rolled, and now he's going Resto Druid, and my friend who was playing the Enhance is going to play Shadow Priest. He's a priest main anyway, so we're gonna play Warrior Shadow Priest, our Druid, which is very strong right now until like they do something about Shadow Priest, if they nerf it or if they Yeah, I mean, if they nerf it, like you could see potential changes in the meta. Honestly, I think right now TSG is probably pretty strong, and Warrior Shadow Priest is pretty strong too. I want to go ahead and try it, but like I said, we had only queued one time, which is like from that one VOD that we had, and that was the first day of the season. And like everyone's just been so busy with life, and it's just been hectic. But we're back now. Um, uh, I just wanted to get all that out of the way first before I had talked about the build, right? Okay, so the build that I'm running is again opting for a lot more crit, moving like shuffling some things around. Obviously, one of the big ones that we're running is Blade Master's Torment, which you have two Blade Storms. Obviously, it's attached to your avatar, which is a really big deal for an Arms Warrior. I stopped using all my slam talents. I realized that I can get more utility out of these points that are more beneficial for not other people, but for myself as an Arms Warrior. Since we're already really squishy, I've opted for bitter immunity, CDR on pummel and overpower, piercing howl, which is always going to be good. I wanted to keep impending victory. Um, Fast foot works okay, and I've got pain and gain, right? The only thing I would probably sub out, like I said, this goes inside with like my last guide where we had one additional point to put into other things that we need. The same rule applies. The same rule applies. So if I were to ever want to swap anything out, I would probably swap out fast footwork for wrecking or shattering throw. Again, this goes inside with like my last guide where I talked about like what things are useful. All right. As for arms, it's pretty much the same as my last guide, except obviously I'm not using whirlwind because right now a lot of the things that we're queuing right now has a lot of like minions and pets attached to it, which does not feel good to run any form of like cleave into. You kind of want to be more single target oriented. While maintaining the same freedoms of having, two blade storms. So I'm not like maining unhinged by any means. Um, I'm also not even really playing Rend. I play Rend sometimes. As an example, if I'm playing Rend in like twos against like a rogue or something, or like a feral, like I want to keep them dotted so they can't like go onto the pillar and reset, bullshit like that. So I would opt out of Rend, and I would put that either into Blood Surge or Stormwall. Stormwall can be pretty decent, given like pets, minions, things like that. You could potentially parry off of those. It's either these two talents you want to spec into. It's either going to be Stormwall or Blood Surge. Getting more rage for bleed effects is always nice, so you could do that too. Um, and again, everything is really the same except for your final talent point, right? So you would sub out Ren for either of these two, and then if there's like a lot of pets on the enemy team, whether it be a Windwalker Monk, some of them run Serenity, so that's not always the case. A Windwalker Monk, but sometimes they run Serenity, Unholy DK, BM Hunter if they exist, Demonology Lock, anything that has the ability to take away your chance to hit your main targets with Mortal Strike out of Blade Storm is never a good feeling. That always feels terrible. Um, it never feels good ever. So I usually opt out of it for either like Fatal Mark or Executioner's Precision. I'm opting more for Fatal Mark over the other two or over the other one because again, sudden death procs, as they are really good, you don't really get them that often. And honestly, like I don't think people will ever be low enough HP at any given time to stack that up to be a meaningful damage buff. Also, it's halved in PvP by 50%. It does like 17% increased damage, stacking up to 2 times. So I opt for Fatal Mark, which is also kind of nerfed, but again, this is really good if you're maining onto one target. And there's like not really any paladins right now, so this will almost always be stacking um, like on your main target. And also it's good because if you swap any other target, which you might do that sometimes, you get so many Mortal Strike resets that like your Fatal Mark will start stacking into like 4 or 5, and it kind of just stays up the entire time. I've never once seen this really drop, but it's just good into those comps that like you can't cleave with Unhinged, and it's like, oh, you have to like sit one target, or you need that debuff on them, so when they do hit that execute range, you hit them pretty hard, right? Regardless of it being a critical strike or not. Again, you also have crit modifiers for execute, right? So like it's a pretty big deal, but so it could help secure that kill a little bit faster. Or a little bit better, not faster. My bad. But yeah, these are pretty much your options. You've got Fatal Mark, Unhinged, and Executioner's Precision. Again, that all remains to be the same as my last guide, but I want to reiterate, since the meta has changed with a lot of pets that there are, Unhinged is being played a little bit less. It's still really, really good. Don't get me wrong. It's still insanely good. It's just it does not feel good when you're playing into pets and this thing just does not proc on the things that you want it to, right? So it just doesn't feel good. As for the honor talents, again, nothing really has changed. Like, it's mostly just priority on, like, if again, same as the last guide. It's mostly priority if it's on if the team has something I can disarm. If they don't have that, if they have again like a warlock, which they probably will, you pretty much opt for wrecking throw and demolition to pop sack. Good for Mistweaver bubbles. You do a lot of damage into those. It's really just the same thing as like the last guide. It's just prioritizing mostly disarm and demolition. If you want to run more damage, you could run Warbringer, which is okay. Storm of Destruction is also good, paired with Anger Management. Storm of Destruction is much more appealing if you're able to run Unhinged, just because you do so much more damage. But if you can't run Unhinged, then it's better to probably run Warbringer, despite it being pretty buggy, which I've already talked about in a previous video. Like, the route feels really awkward and like unfun whenever like somebody just moves away from your charge and it doesn't root them at all. It does not feel good. So really, it's the same thing as last video. You kind of run through a checklist and see what you are needing. So if it's disarm, nope. If it's a lock, wrecking throw, demolition, got it. Neither of those, Warbringer, Storm of Destruction, things like that. The other talents, I mean, you already know we're running Sharpening Blade, mandatory. Warbanner pretty much is mandatory as well. Outside of that, everything else doesn't really feel like important. I don't really ever run Master and Commander anymore. Duel, I don't really run that anymore. I haven't really ran Duel since Legion, I'm gonna be honest with you. And honestly, like that's really it. I don't see Rebound being that good. It just reflects one single spell. Rebound would have been absolutely insane if this was Legion spell reflect, but that's just not the case. It's a few expansions ago. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's pretty much it for honor talents. But I wanted to like cover why I'm using like a crit sustained build, I guess. And I really like it a lot. And doing away with Rend and Slam entirely feels pretty good. It's just like the last video where like I was prioritizing my overpowers with Mortal Strike, except the only difference was that I was keeping up Rend, or sorry, not Rend, Whirlwind for more damage, which it could be okay, but there's not anything to cleave like super hard like that anymore. So it's mostly just I'm opting for a very bursty single target crit build, which with slight mobility tweaks with like double blade storm and stuff like that. But the rotation is literally the exact same. Like I said in the last video, and you keep Whirlwind out. You don't need Rend. You don't need Slam. It's mostly centric around Overpower and Mortal Strike. And if you don't have any Mortal Strike resets, you press something else essentially. I'm so sorry. A lot of stuff happened in the background on my end. Part of my video got corrupted. I was trying to explain before that the reason why I am Dark Iron Dwarf now is simply because of the racial. The racial is very strong. A lot of people have been re-rolling to Dark Iron Dwarf for the instant cleanse, which gives me 875 main stat, an additional 291 main stat as well for each effect remove. I believe this is 1 poison, 1 disease, 1 curse, magic, and bleed. Effect all increase that by 291 rather than every single dot in the game. Otherwise, that'd be broken. But so it's pretty strong, pretty solid. Even more so as a warrior, because I have bitter immunity, which is basically a nerfed version of this racial, which just heals me for 20% instantly and removes all diseases, poisons, and curses. So this is pretty good. It's like it basically it's 2 cleanses. It's really nice to have, and I think it's better than being human. And human was decent too. Like you got 2% additional secondary stats from all sources, which was really nice. But in the way this current meta is right now, I kind of prefer having a big cleanse and like a mini cleanse, and I get some extra damage out of it too. I have not been having fun lately playing this game, but now that I've like thought about some things, changing my comp around, we might have some fun again. I definitely want to push some threes and probably queue Shadow Priest Warrior and just have a good time with the game, upload more stuff. But that's all I wanted to cover in this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you guys in the next video.